Hello and welcome to the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie, and today, where does money start from and how does it change as we start to deal with more transactions and then start to trade with foreign currencies? Today, for fun, what if Robinson Crusoe was stranded on an island for so long that he decided to invent his own currency? We're going to play a game of hypotheticals with Steve today to try and understand the role of money better, right from the very beginning. That's today on the Debunking Economics podcast. Now, Geoffrey Robinson, the Aussie human rights barrister, who these days lives in London, did a great series of shows on TV called Hypotheticals, where he asked notable guests what they would do in various situations. And he added to the scenario with increasingly complex or very often ridiculous circumstances that would change the decisions that people would make, often very ethical decisions. So I thought we could do that today with Steve. Less a question of ethics, more an opportunity to track the development of money. And look, Steve, we're going to start with Robinson Crusoe on an island with Man Friday, supposedly cut off from the rest of society. I've always wondered about this. Why would Man Friday in the first place be subservient to Robinson Crusoe? I mean, presumably, Man Friday is more muscular. He's been looking after himself. Robinson Crusoe, comes from the West. He's been mollycoddled. Why would Man Friday work for him? Why wouldn't he say, well, excuse me, I'm the boss here?
Well, I think that's often because Robin Crusoe's the one holding the muskets.
Right. Just weapons, basically.
Just weapons.
But, but he has to sleep.
And also, I mean, that's actually one wonderful comment by Arthur C. Clarke, which gives a good background to why this actually tends to happen when you have an isolated community suddenly confronted with the technology of another. And that was Clarke's comment that the technology of any sufficiently advanced culture to ours will appear as magic.
Right.
And if you imagine, if you just imagine the genuine confrontations that occurred when it wasn't, some interesting English fiction like Crusoe, but it was actually Cortez turning up on the shore, and the boats, quite well-armed boats turn up with spears and arrows, and suddenly find that when they're twice as far away as the range of an arrow, they're all starting to fall over from little lead bullets hitting them. And when there's a flash of light at one end, there's somebody dies at their end. Magic. And at that point, you don't regard yourself as equal to them anymore. You fall into believing they're gods.
Maybe this...
And in fact, that in fact was part of what happened with Montezuma, because the part of their, unfortunately as far as I understand, any Mexicans please correct me, but as I understand, part of the mythology of the Aztecs was the arrival of a white god.
Right. And I guess that's why we have this fixation with science fiction and aliens taking over, because with far greater technology, because that's all we can perceive, because we've done everything we possibly can.
We've done it ourselves. Yeah. It might be a guilt. One of those. What do you call those things when you have a reverse psychology coming back at you, and it's yeah,
well, it's guilt. I think you almost said guilt.
Your own guilt.
Yeah, exactly. So look, and we've got Robinson Crusoe and Man Friday. However that relationship's developed, they're happily making shelter, catching food, cooking it, and living in loincloths in the sunshine. All sounds very idyllic. But then we find Woman Saturday. Who also is going to do work. She's going to make clothes. She's going to do the cooking, because these are obviously the dark ages for women's liberation. So how do we decide then who gets what between Woman Saturday and Man Friday? Robinson Crusoe might then say, look, I'm going to introduce this concept of money as an incentive for you to work hard. The harder you work, the more money you get, and then you can spend that money on, you can buy a day off, or you can buy more food, you can eat more than the other one, you can get access to my solar-powered radio, so you can listen to the BBC World Service and find out what's going on in the world.
I'm not going to even follow up on that one.
How does that change behaviour, though? Because in theory, both of them are going to work harder if I introduce money, aren't they?
Well, that's the argument. In essentially what you put forward is the simplified story that modern monetary theory puts about the origin of money itself, which is to say that the state, and we've established that Robinson Crusoe is the state because he's got the muskets, imposes a monetary system to motivate rather than the subsistence behaviour motivate production for the state's needs, and out of that you get the development of money, which then enables a capitalist economy to evolve, which uses money and credit. So that's often the one way in which it's put across, that money came into existence, and this is back to the historical record. Now, I far prefer working in history to fantasy. If you want fantasy, call a neoclassical economist. But
the neoclassical economist is going to love this episode then, because it's pure fantasy. But I'm using it as an excuse for you to give me the history lesson.
Well, the history seems to be, and it's actually quite intriguing. More recent anthropology is making the picture more clouded again. Money has evolved in all sorts of ways in different societies around the world. Sometimes, yes, it was a straight case of the state imposing money. One of the best examples there, and I don't know it as well as I'd like to, but the Professor Christine Desarnes at Harvard University Law School has done work on the evolution of monetary systems in post-Roman Britain. And there's one particular instance where a king, of course there were many kings in England at that stage, basically the guy with the biggest army was the king, whatever region you're talking about. Somewhere located in England, let's say it was in Surrey, invented a form of credit, which was pretty much, I think that we may be neither the tally sticks or the precursor to tally sticks, to enable taxation and also to enable commerce. And what happened was, what had been a fairly primitive subsistence economy with only minor amounts of trade occurring very rapidly became a commercial economy with a dramatic increase in productivity. So in that case, the state providing the state effectively provided the money in that case. In other cases, there are points where it was a form of, again, I'm paraphrasing what I've read in anthropological research, but something that evolved more in a private system, a sort of a landlord approach, where landlords would use forms of credit to require landless labourers to work on their land, or to take over small holders and things like that. And also often it revolved out of the religious institutions. So if you think about the original human societies, which maxed out at about 150 people, according to a fabulous piece of research called the Dunbar number, about 150 was all we could keep in our heads, and people relationship with 150 different people and the relations they each had with each other. That's the limit of our brain power. And in those societies, it was a mutual gift situation. So, I'd gift you let's say I was a good manufacturer. I'd gift you a little Rode microphone, and you'd gift me back a tennis racket, et cetera, et cetera. And it was all gifting, and therefore a gift, as well as a gift being and giving to you, it also made you in a form of debt with the person who gave you that, and there's always this mutual reciprocal exchanges.
Right.
When you had the development of larger than 150 people groups, which largely involved hierarchy, and that's a word I want to come back to, a form of hierarchy to make it possible to interact with only 150 people yourself, but to be part of a society which might be 10 times or 100 times that size. As that started to evolve, the responsibility of keeping track of these interpersonal obligations started to devolve towards the witch doctors, in that case, the priests of those early societies. And then when the priesthood became itself institutionalized in a religious institution, that was the one that kept the records. It also was a commercial venture as well. And with the combination of the two, you had the formation of the state coming out of a religious system.
Right. Well, it all started with religion, but certainly money is a long way from religion now. So how does it develop when, for example, Robinson Crusoe and Man Friday discover there's another village on the other side of the island, then they discover there's a neighbouring island with a very productive economy? What's their money worth then? We'll go through all of those scenarios in the full version of this podcast, and to do that, you need to subscribe at debunkingeconomics.com. Go to the website and choose one of the plans on the right-hand side of the web page, or you can become a supporter of Steve Keen on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen, and if you pledge $10 or more support each month, then you get access to this and all the other podcasts in this series. So hopefully you'll do one of those two things, and we'll see you back here again very soon for the full version of this podcast. Till then, I'm Phil Dobbie. Thanks for listening.